Admiral Kethvok stood before the massive viewing screen in his flagship's command center. Stars stretched endlessly in all directions, but these stars belonged to him. The Zeltharian Empire had ruled this part of space for 3,000 years. Hundreds of worlds bowed to their power. Millions of ships carried their flag across the galaxy. The Admiral's forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. His scaled skin gleamed under the bright lights of the bridge. Around him, dozens of officers worked at their stations. They monitored trade routes, tracked rebel movements, and kept watch for any threats to Imperial power. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Zeth from the communication station, "the daily reports are ready for your review." Kethvox nodded and activated his personal screen. Numbers and data flowed past his eyes. Production reports from mining worlds, military updates from the outer colonies, intelligence briefings about new species discovered by their scout ships. One report caught his attention. It was marked with a yellow warning flag, Minor Threat Assessment. The file was labeled Species Designation, Human, Planet Earth, Threat Level Category 4. The Admiral opened the file and read, "Humans were a young species from a small blue planet near the galaxy's outer rim. They had only developed space travel within the last 100 years. Their technology was basic compared to Imperial standards. Their ships were slow and poorly armed. Their government was divided into hundreds of small nations that constantly fought each other." "Primitive," Kethvox muttered to himself. The report showed that humans had barely managed to colonize their own solar system. They had no real military fleet, no advanced weapons, no threats to Imperial interests. The most interesting part was recent. Human scouts had made contact with several alien species in the past 50 years. They were trying to learn about galactic politics and trade. Some human colonies had been established on uninhabited worlds far from Imperial space. Another species ready for incorporation, the Admiral decided. The Empire had a simple process for dealing with primitive races. First, they would observe and study them. Then they would make contact and offer protection in exchange for resources and loyalty. If the species refused, the Empire would take what they needed by force. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery. Officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. This was routine duty in the heart of Imperial space. "Nothing dangerous ever happened here, Admiral." The voice came from the sensor station. Officer Morth's tentacles were moving rapidly across his controls. "I'm detecting an unknown signature approaching the outer system." Kethvox turned toward the sensor officer. "Define unknown, Lieutenant." "The ship's design doesn't match anything in our database, sir. It's approximately the size of a heavy cruiser, but the energy readings are strange." The Admiral moved to the sensor station. The main screen showed a three-dimensional image of the approaching vessel. The ship looked wrong somehow. Where Imperial ships were smooth and curved, this one was angular and sharp. Instead of the elegant lines preferred by most galactic species, it looked like it had been built for war. "How far away?" Kethvox asked. 12 hours at current speed, sir. The vessel is maintaining a steady course directly toward Nexus Prime." The Admiral studied the image more carefully. The ship's hull was dark gray, almost black. Strange projections extended from its surface. Weapon ports, sensor arrays, or something else entirely. Energy readings flickered and pulsed in patterns that made no sense. "Any response to our identification requests?" "Negative, sir. The vessel is not responding to any communication attempts." Kethvox felt a small chill run down his spine. In 3 decades of naval service, he had never seen anything like this. Unknown ships simply didn't approach Imperial core worlds without permission. The few pirates or rebels foolish enough to try were destroyed long before they reached the inner system. "Could it be a new ship design from one of our allies?" he asked. Morth checked his readings again. "No, sir. The energy signature is completely unknown. Whatever drives that ship, it's not using any technology in our databases." The Admiral ordered a full sensor sweep of the surrounding area. Perhaps this was the advanced scout for a larger force. But the deep-range scanners found nothing. The unknown ship was alone in the vast emptiness of space. "Alert the fleet," Kethvox commanded. "I want all ships in the system prepared for possible hostile contact." Messages flashed across communication networks. Throughout the Nexus Prime system, Imperial ships received new orders. Patrol vessels changed course to intercept the intruder. Battle groups took defensive positions around important facilities. The mighty Grand Fleet, all 200,000 ships, began to stir. Hours passed. The unknown vessel continued its approach without deviation. It ignored all attempts at communication. Sensor readings became more detailed as it drew closer, but the information only made the situation more confusing. The ship's hull appeared to be made of materials that didn't exist in Imperial science. Energy flowed through its structure in impossible patterns. The power output from its engines should have required a vessel 10 times its size. "Sir," Morth reported, "I'm detecting what appear to be weapon systems. The configurations are unlike anything we've seen before." Kethvox studied the tactical display. Red markers indicated possible threat sources scattered across the alien ship's hull. There were far too many of them. No ship of that size should be able to mount such heavy armament. "Recommendations?" the Admiral asked his staff. Commander Yith, his chief tactical officer, spoke first. "Standard protocol for unidentified vessels entering Imperial space is immediate destruction, sir. We should eliminate the threat before it can reach inhabited areas." "But we don't know if it actually is a threat," argued Intelligence Officer Quinn. "It could be a diplomatic vessel from an unknown species. Destroying it without cause might start a war with people we know nothing about." The debate continued for several minutes. Meanwhile, the alien ship grew closer to Imperial space. Long-range sensors tracked its steady progress toward the heart of the Empire. Then everything changed. "Admiral," the communications officer's voice was urgent. "We're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," Kethvox ordered. The main screen flickered and changed. Instead of the tactical display, it now showed the bridge of the alien ship. The Admiral found himself looking at a creature he had never seen before. It was bipedal, like many species in the galaxy. But its skin was a strange pinkish color instead of scales or fur. It had only 2 arms and 2 eyes. Hair covered the top of its head in an unusual reddish-brown color. The creature wore what appeared to be a military uniform, dark blue with strange markings on the shoulders. It sat in a command chair that looked functional but uncomfortable compared to Imperial designs. When it spoke, the voice was calm and steady. The universal translator immediately converted the words to Imperial standard. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Indomitable. We've come to collect our people." The transmission ended. The screen returned to the tactical display showing the approaching ship. Kethvox stared at the display in confusion. The Empire held no prisoners or slaves from this unknown species. Imperial records showed no contact with creatures matching this appearance. The message made no sense. "Human," whispered Intelligence Officer Quinn. That was a human. The Admiral turned to stare at his intelligence officer. "Impossible. The reports show humans have no military capability. No ships capable of reaching Imperial space." "Then how do you explain what we just saw, sir?" Kethvox looked back at the tactical display. The ship labeled UES Indomitable continued its approach toward the heart of the Zeltharian Empire. A single vessel crewed by members of a supposedly primitive species, coming to collect their people from an empire that had never encountered them before. Something was very wrong about this situation, and Admiral Kethvox was beginning to suspect that the Empire's intelligence reports about humanity might be dangerously incomplete. The human ship moved through space like it owned every star in the system. Captain Sarah Chen's vessel maintained its steady course toward Nexus Prime, ignoring the growing Imperial fleet that surrounded it on all sides. Admiral Kethvox watched from his flagship as more and more ships joined the formation. Cruisers, destroyers, battleships, and carriers moved into position. The Grand Fleet was the most powerful military force in known space. Any reasonable species would see the overwhelming odds and surrender immediately. The human ship didn't even slow down. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Zeth, "we're receiving urgent messages from fleet commanders. They're requesting permission to engage the intruder." "Tell them to maintain formation," Kethvox replied. "I want to understand what we're dealing with before we start shooting." The Admiral studied the tactical display more carefully. The human vessel was now surrounded by over 50,000 Imperial ships. Battle groups stretched across thousands of kilometers in every direction. It was a show of force, designed to intimidate any potential enemy into submission. The Indomitable continued on its path. "Without any change in course or speed, they must see our fleet," muttered Commander Yith. "Even primitive sensors would detect this many ships. Maybe they don't understand what they're looking at," suggested Intelligence Officer Quinn. "If their technology is as basic as our reports indicate, They might not realize how outmatched they are. Kethvox wasn't convinced. Something about the human ship's confident approach felt wrong. No species developed space travel without also developing some sense of military tactics. Even the most primitive races understood the concept of running away from superior forces. "Open a communication channel," the Admiral ordered. "All frequencies maximum power. I want to make sure they hear this." The communications array activated with a deep hum. Energy flowed through the ship's transmitters at levels that could be detected across half the galaxy. "Unknown human vessel," Kethvox spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Admiral Kethvox of the Zeltharian Imperial Navy. You are entering restricted Imperial space without authorization. You will immediately change course and submit to inspection, or we will consider you a hostile threat." The message repeated on multiple frequencies in several different languages. Standard Imperial procedure ensured that even the most primitive species could understand the warning. Minutes passed without response. The human ship continued its approach. "Sir," called Officer Morth from sensors, "the vessel is now within effective weapons range of our outer patrol groups." Kethvox nodded grimly. Imperial doctrine was clear about unidentified ships that refused to respond to official warnings. After proper procedures had been followed, such vessels were to be disabled or destroyed. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the calm confidence of Captain Chen's earlier message. Maybe it was the strange energy readings from the human ship. Maybe it was just 30 years of military experience telling him that this situation was not what it appeared to be. The decision was made for him. "Admiral," the communications officer's voice was excited. "We're receiving another transmission from the human vessel. Put it through." Once again, Captain Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main screen. She looked completely calm despite being surrounded by the largest military fleet in galactic history. Her strange human features showed no fear, no concern, no recognition of her impossible situation. "Admiral Kethvox," she said in that same steady voice. "Your forces have been identified as holding territories that belong to the Human Colonial Initiative. We don't want to fight, but we will. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal proceedings." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Every officer stared at the main screen in disbelief. A single ship crewed by members of a primitive species had just demanded that the Zeltharian Empire abandon Imperial space. Commander Yeath was the first to speak. "Sir, that was either the bravest or the most stupid thing I have ever witnessed." "Stupid," Kethvox replied firmly. "It has to be stupid. No rational species would make such demands when facing these odds." But even as he said it, the Admiral felt doubt creeping into his mind. Captain Chen had not looked stupid. She had looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Quen spoke up. "I've been reviewing our files on human colonial activities. There are records of several small settlements established in disputed territory along our outer borders." "Disputed territory?" "Yes, sir. Regions claimed by the Empire but not yet officially incorporated. The colonies were small, maybe a few thousand humans each. They were dealt with according to standard protocols." Kethvox understood immediately. Standard protocols for unauthorized settlements in Imperial space were simple and brutal. Survey fleets would identify the colonies, evaluate their strategic value, and then sterilize the planets to prevent future territorial disputes. "When?" he asked. "Approximately 50 years ago, sir. Long-range scouts found 3 human colonies on uninhabited worlds. The settlements were eliminated to prevent complications during formal annexation of the sector." The Admiral felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. 50 years ago, human space travel had been primitive. The colonies would have been isolated, defenseless, unable to call for help or escape. The Imperial Navy would have wiped them out without difficulty. Were the humans informed of the action? No, sir. Earth was considered too primitive to be worth contacting. The assumption was that they would never develop the capability to investigate what happened to their colonies. The assumption had been wrong. "Admiral," Officer Morth called from sensors, "I'm detecting massive energy spikes from the human vessel. Whatever they're powering up, it's drawing more energy than our entire battle group." Kethvox looked at the tactical display. The single human ship sat in the middle of his fleet like a predator that had chosen its hunting ground. Energy readings fluctuated wildly as unknown systems activated throughout the Indomitable. "Sir, recommend immediate attack," Commander Yith urged. "Whatever they're preparing, we should not give them time to complete it." The Admiral considered his options. Imperial doctrine was clear: destroy threats before they could act. But something about this situation felt like a trap. The humans had come here knowing they would face impossible odds. They had demanded Imperial withdrawal from territory the Empire had held for decades. They were powering up weapons while surrounded by 50,000 enemy ships. Either they were completely insane, or they knew something the Imperial Navy did not. "Sir?" Commander Yith pressed. "Your orders?" Kethvox made his decision. "All ships, weapons hot, but do not engage. I want to see what they're planning." "Sir, that's extremely risky." "I'm aware of the risks, Commander, but something tells me that attacking first might be an even bigger mistake." Minutes crawled by. Energy readings from the human ship continued to climb to impossible levels. Fleet commanders sent increasingly urgent requests for permission to engage. The tactical situation grew more tense with each passing second. Then Captain Chen's voice echoed across all Imperial communication frequencies. She didn't appear on screen this time, just her calm, steady words broadcasting to every ship in the fleet. "Admiral Kethvox, your hour is almost up. I want to be very clear about what's going to happen next. We told you we came for our people. We never said they were still alive. You're going to show us where you buried the human colonies you destroyed 50 years ago. And then you're going to learn what happens when you murder human children." The communication ended. Energy readings from the Indomitable spiked to levels that should have been impossible for any ship to contain, Admiral. Kethvox realized that the Zeltharian Empire was about to face something it had never encountered before, an enemy that fought not for conquest or resources, but for justice. And something told him that humanity's idea of justice was going to be very different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. The hour was almost up. The hour ended with no response from the Imperial fleet. Admiral Kethvox watched his tactical display as 50,000 ships maintained their positions around the single human vessel. The Indomitable hung motionless in space, its dark hull reflecting the light of nearby stars. "Captain Sarah," Chen's voice cut through the silence with deadly calm. "We warned you." The human battleship opened fire. The first weapons to activate were unlike anything in Imperial databases. Beams of twisted gravity lanced out from the Indomitable's hull, reaching impossible distances in mere seconds. Where they struck Imperial ships, the vessels simply collapsed inward on themselves. Metal twisted and compressed as local gravity fields increased 1,000-fold. Entire destroyers crumpled into balls of scrap metal barely larger than escape pods. "All ships, return fire," Admiral Kethvox shouted into his communicator. The Imperial fleet responded instantly. Thousands of plasma cannons fired simultaneously, creating a wall of superheated energy that should have vaporized any target. Particle beams powerful enough to crack planets converged on the human ship from every direction. The weapons struck an invisible barrier around the Indomitable and simply disappeared. Energy readings showed the human ship's shields absorbing every attack without strain. Worse, the absorbed energy seemed to be feeding back into the ship's own weapon systems. "Impossible," whispered Commander Yith. "Nothing can absorb that much firepower." The human ship proved him wrong by firing its second weapon type. Streams of pure antimatter shot out in carefully aimed bursts. Each stream moved in impossible curves, bending around friendly vessels to strike multiple targets simultaneously. Imperial ships caught in the antimatter streams didn't just explode, they ceased to exist. Matter and energy annihilated each other in flashes of light visible across the solar system. Officer Morth's voice cracked with panic. "Sir, we've lost 3,000 ships in the first minute of engagement." Admiral Kethvox stared at his tactical display in horror. Red markers representing destroyed Imperial vessels disappeared from the screen faster than he could count them. The human ship continued its methodical attack, weapons firing in patterns that defied every law of physics he knew. "How are they targeting so many ships at once?" Commander Yith demanded. "Unknown, sir," Morth replied, his tentacles working frantically over his instruments. "Their targeting systems appear to be everywhere at once. It's like they're seeing through multiple dimensions." The third wave of human weapons activated. Reality itself seemed to bend around the Indomitable as space-time warped in ways that hurt to look at. Missiles launched from the human ship's hull, but these weren't normal projectiles. They appeared to travel backward through time, striking Imperial vessels before they had actually been fired. "Sir," called the fleet communications officer, "Battle Group 7 is reporting that their ships are being destroyed by weapons that haven't been launched yet." Kethvox felt his world crumbling around him. Nothing in his military training had prepared him for this. Imperial weapons were based on well-understood principles of physics. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic fields, all following rules that had governed warfare for thousands of years. The humans were using weapons that ignored those rules entirely. All ships, attempt tactical withdrawal. The Admiral ordered. The response from his fleet commanders was immediate and terrifying. Sir, we can't withdraw. Our hyperspace drives aren't functioning. Jump engines are offline across the entire fleet. It's like space itself is locked down around us. Kethvox looked at his own ship's navigation display. The hyperspace indicators that should have shown possible jump vectors were completely blank. The Indomitable was somehow preventing FTL travel throughout the entire system. The human ship had trapped them. Sir? Officer Morth's voice was barely a whisper. I'm detecting additional energy signatures. The humans are launching fighters. Small craft emerged from hidden bays along the Indomitable's hull, but these weren't normal fighters. Each one moved with impossible speed and agility, diving through Imperial formations like they were flying through empty space instead of active combat zones. Their weapons were smaller versions of the mothership's reality warping arsenal. Imperial point defense systems tried to track the human fighters and failed completely. The small craft seemed to exist in several places at once, making targeting impossible. They wove between Imperial ships, leaving trails of destruction that made no tactical sense. How many fighters are we facing? Kethvox asked. I don't know, sir. The sensors keep giving different numbers. It's like they're multiplying. The Admiral realized that humanity had turned warfare itself into a science that the rest of the galaxy couldn't understand. While other species had spent millennia perfecting existing technologies, humans had apparently rebuilt physics from the ground up. Sir, Commander Yith's voice was urgent. Long-range sensors are detecting more signatures approaching from the outer system. Kethvox felt his blood turn to ice. More human ships. Unknown, sir. The signatures are strange, like the Indomitable, but different. I count at least 12 distinct contacts. The Admiral closed his eyes briefly. The single human ship had already destroyed a quarter of the Grand Fleet. If there were more of them coming. Open a channel to the human ship, he ordered quietly. Sir, do it. The communication array activated. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen once again. Behind her, Kethvox could see the bridge of the Indomitable. Human crew members worked at stations with calm efficiency, as if they were conducting routine exercises instead of fighting the largest fleet in galactic history. Admiral, Captain Chen said pleasantly, are you ready to discuss terms? What do you want? Kethvox asked. I told you. We came for our people. The colonies your forces destroyed 50 years ago contained 127,000 human civilians, men, women, and children who were trying to build new lives far from Earth. The Admiral felt shame burning in his chest. Imperial policy had classified those settlements as minor obstacles to expansion. The humans inside them had been statistics in a report, not people with names and families and dreams. The colonies were in disputed territory, he said weakly. Standard protocols. Your protocols authorize the murder of children, Captain Chen interrupted, her voice suddenly cold as space. Protocols don't justify genocide, Admiral. They just make it easier for people like you to sleep at night. The human ship's weapons continued firing throughout their conversation. Imperial vessels died by the hundreds as reality warping technologies carved through the fleet, like it was made of paper instead of military-grade armor. What are your terms? Kethvox asked. Full withdrawal from all systems within 50 light-years of the destroyed colonies, reparations paid to the families of the murdered colonists, and a formal apology from the Imperial government acknowledging what was done. I don't have authority to agree to those terms. Then find someone who does, quickly, Captain. Chen's image flickered and disappeared. The slaughter resumed immediately. Admiral Kethvox looked around his bridge. His officers stared at their instruments in shock and fear. The greatest military force in galactic history was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy ship using weapons that shouldn't exist. And according to sensors, 12 more human vessels were approaching. Sir, Officer Morth called softly. What are your orders? Kethvox realized he was facing a choice that would determine the future of the Empire. He could continue fighting and watch his entire fleet die against an enemy he couldn't understand. Or he could accept that humanity was something the galaxy had never encountered before, a species that had learned to weaponize the fundamental forces of reality itself. Get me a direct channel to Imperial Command, he ordered. Emergency priority. Tell them we need to negotiate immediately. Sir? Tell them that everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong. And tell them that if we don't surrender soon, there won't be an empire left to save. The communication array activated, sending an emergency message toward the Imperial capital. As signals raced across space at faster than light speeds, the Indomitable continued its methodical destruction of the Grand Fleet. Captain Sarah Chen had come to collect her people, and she was teaching the galaxy that when humans said they would do something, they meant it. See, the emergency transmission to Imperial Command would take 3 hours to reach the capital world. Admiral Kethvox didn't have 3 hours. At the current rate of destruction, his entire fleet would be wiped out long before help could arrive. Sir, Officer Morth reported with trembling voice, we've lost 60% of the Grand Fleet. The human ship shows no signs of damage or power reduction. The Indomitable continued its methodical slaughter, weapons firing in patterns that made Imperial tactical computers crash from trying to calculate the physics involved. Each shot seemed to bend reality around itself, striking targets that should have been impossible to hit from the firing angle. All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel, Kethvox ordered desperately. Maximum power all weapons. The surviving Imperial fleet obeyed. 20,000 ships turned their guns on the single human battleship and fired everything they had. The combined firepower could have melted a moon. Energy levels spiked so high that nearby space itself began to glow from radiation overflow. The attack struck the Indomitable's shields and accomplished nothing. Worse than nothing, the human ship absorbed the energy and immediately redirected it into its own weapons. The next salvo of human fire was twice as powerful as before. They're using our own weapons against us, Commander Yeath whispered in horror. Admiral Kethvox realized that conventional warfare was useless against an enemy like this. The humans had somehow developed technology that turned the Empire's greatest strength, overwhelming firepower, into a weakness. Sir, the communications officer called. I'm receiving a priority message from Fleet Admiral Zorth himself. The main screen activated, showing the scaled face of the Empire's supreme military commander. Fleet Admiral Zorth had commanded Imperial forces for over 50 years. He had conquered 17 systems and crushed dozens of rebellions. Nothing in the galaxy frightened him. He looked terrified. Admiral Kethvox, Zorth's voice was strained. I've been monitoring your engagement. What in the name of the ancestors are we facing? Unknown human technology, sir. They've trapped us in normal space and are systematically destroying the fleet. Our weapons are useless against their defenses. Have you tried planet-killer weapons? Kethvox felt a chill run down his spine. Planet-killer weapons were the Empire's ultimate deterrent, antimatter warheads capable of cracking worlds apart. They were never used except in the most desperate circumstances. Sir, deploying planet killers in a populated system. Do it, Zorth interrupted. If these humans can destroy the Grand Fleet, they're a threat to the entire Empire. Use whatever force is necessary. The Admiral looked around his bridge. His officers stared back at him with expressions of shock and fear. Planet-killer weapons in the Nexus Prime system would cause massive civilian casualties. The radiation alone would make several worlds uninhabitable for centuries. But if they didn't stop the human ship somehow, there would be no Empire left to protect. Tactical. Prepare planet-killer deployment, Kethvox ordered quietly. Target coordinates around the human vessel. We'll use the stellar disruption to destroy them. Sir, Commander Yith protested, the blast radius will affect our own ships. I'm aware of that, Commander. Prepare for deployment. The Imperial fleet's most devastating weapons activated for the first time in decades. Massive warheads armed with enough antimatter to crack a planet into pieces moved into launch position. If they could create an artificial supernova event around the human ship, surely nothing could survive that level of destruction. Weapons ready, sir, reported the tactical officer. Fire. 6 planet-killer warheads launched simultaneously from different positions around the Indomitable. They accelerated to incredible speeds, programmed to detonate in a carefully calculated pattern that would maximize the destructive effect. The resulting explosion would be visible from neighboring star systems. The warheads reached their target coordinates and detonated. Nuclear fire erupted across thousands of kilometers of space. Temperatures spiked to levels found only in the hearts of stars. Radiation and energy waves spread outward at near light speed. Any normal ship caught in that inferno would be reduced to individual atoms in microseconds. The light was so bright that every screen on every Imperial ship automatically dimmed to protect their crews from blindness. For long seconds, the center of the fleet was hidden behind a wall of nuclear fire that outshone the system's sun. Slowly, the light faded, the energy dissipated. The artificial star died away. The Indomitable emerged from the nuclear holocaust completely undamaged. Impossible, Commander Yith breathed. But it wasn't just undamaged. Sensors showed that the human ship was actually glowing brighter than before. The planet-killer explosions had somehow fed energy directly into its systems. Captain Sarah Chen's voice echoed across Imperial communication channels. "Thank you for the recharge. Now let us show you what humans do to bullies." The Indomitable suddenly accelerated to impossible velocities, moving through Imperial formations like a predator among helpless prey. Its weapons no longer fired in calculated patterns. They unleashed hell in all directions. Reality-warping beams carved through entire battle groups simultaneously. Antimatter streams created chain reactions that destroyed dozens of ships at once, and new weapons activated, devices that seemed to attack ships from multiple dimensions at the same time. Imperial vessels exploded from the inside out as weapons somehow struck them from directions that didn't exist in normal space. "Sir," Officer Morth's voice cracked with panic, "I'm detecting massive power spikes throughout the human ship. They're preparing something big." Admiral Keth Vox watched in horror as the Indomitable came to a complete stop directly in the center of his remaining fleet. Energy readings climbed to levels that should have been physically impossible. Whatever the humans were preparing, it was going to be devastating. "All ships, emergency dispersal pattern," he ordered. "Get as far away from that ship as possible." Imperial vessels tried to flee, but they were still trapped in normal space. The human ship was somehow preventing FTL travel throughout the entire system. There was nowhere to run. The Indomitable's hull began to glow with internal light. Energy patterns flowed across its surface in complex geometric designs. Space itself seemed to bend around the ship as it prepared to unleash whatever ultimate weapon it carried. "Admiral." Captain Chen's voice was calm despite the chaos around her. "I'm going to give you one more chance. Tell me where you buried our colonies. Tell me the names of the officers who gave the orders to murder our children. Do that, and maybe some of your fleet will survive what comes next." Keth Vox realized he was facing a moment that would define the rest of galactic history. The Empire had ruled through superior firepower for 3,000 years. No enemy had ever matched Imperial military might. No species had ever demanded terms from the Zeltharian Navy, until now. The colonies were located in the Kepler 442, Ross 128, and Proxima Centauri systems, he said quietly into his communicator. The orders came from Admiral Threx of the 3rd Survey Fleet. The operation was classified as territorial sterilization, under Imperial Expansion Protocol 7. "Thank you for your honesty, Admiral. That information will be passed to the appropriate authorities." "What authorities?" "The ones who are about to arrive." Long-range sensors suddenly detected multiple new contacts dropping out of hyperspace throughout the system. Not 12 ships as previously detected, but dozens, then hundreds. Each one showed the same impossible energy signature as the Indomitable. Admiral Keth Vox realized that the single human battleship had never been alone. It had been the advance scout for something much larger, a fleet that existed beyond anything the Empire had ever imagined. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity looked like when it went to war. The human fleet materialized out of hyperspace like nightmares becoming real. Admiral Keth Vox watched his sensors as dozens of ships identical to the Indomitable took positions throughout the Nexus Prime system. Each one carried the same impossible weapons, the same reality-warping technology that had destroyed most of the Grand Fleet. But these weren't the only ships arriving. "Sir?" Officer Morth's voice was barely a whisper. "Long-range sensors are detecting similar signatures throughout Imperial space. They're appearing in every major system simultaneously." The tactical display updated to show the true scope of what was happening. Human fleets were emerging from hyperspace above the Empire's most important worlds. Capital ships, battle groups, and assault fleets, all using technology that shouldn't exist. How many? Admiral Kethvox asked. Unknown, sir. The energy signatures are too similar to get accurate counts, but preliminary estimates suggest thousands of ships. The Admiral realized that everything the Empire thought it knew about humanity had been wrong. They weren't a primitive species with basic technology. They were something far more dangerous. A race that had spent centuries learning to kill each other before turning their attention to the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main screen once again. Behind her, the bridge of the Indomitable hummed with quiet activity. Human crew members worked at their stations with the calm efficiency of people who did this sort of thing regularly. Admiral, she said pleasantly, I believe we need to have a more comprehensive discussion. What do you want? Kethvox asked, though he already knew the answer would reshape galactic politics forever. First, let me correct a misunderstanding. I'm not just Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Indomitable. I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the 2nd Human Expeditionary Force. The Indomitable is my flagship, but it's not alone. The tactical display updated to show the full human fleet now present in the system. 47 ships of various sizes, all showing the same impossible energy readings. Each one was apparently capable of the same reality-warping warfare that had decimated the Grand Fleet. Second, Admiral Chen continued, let me explain what's going to happen next. Human fleets are currently in position above every major imperial world. We're not here to conquer your territory or destroy your civilization. We're here to deliver justice for the murder of our colonists. What are your terms? Kethvox asked, knowing he had no choice but to listen. Complete withdrawal from all systems within 50 light-years of the destroyed human colonies. Those regions will become part of the Human Colonial Initiative. Full reparations to be paid to the families of the murdered colonists. We calculate the value at approximately 12 trillion imperial credits. And formal acknowledgement by your government of what was done, along with guarantees that such actions will never be repeated. The Admiral felt his world crumbling around him. The territorial demands alone would cost the Empire dozens of systems. The reparations would bankrupt the Imperial Treasury, and the formal acknowledgement would be a humiliation that would echo through galactic politics for centuries. I don't have authority to agree to those terms, he said. I know. That's why we're having this conversation with your Emperor directly. The main screen split to show a second transmission source. The new image showed the throne room of the Imperial Palace on the capital world of Zelthar Prime. Emperor Valdris himself sat on the ancient crystal throne, surrounded by his advisors and ministers. The Emperor looked old. Older than Kethvox had ever seen him. The weight of ruling an interstellar empire for 60 years showed in every line of his scaled face. Admiral Chen, the Emperor said formally, I have been monitoring your actions against our forces. What you have done here today will not go unanswered. Your Majesty, Admiral Chen replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy, what we have done here today is a direct response to the massacre of 127,000 human civilians by your forces 50 years ago. If you want to discuss unanswered actions, we should probably start there. Those colonies were in disputed territory. Imperial law doesn't apply to human citizens, Your Majesty. Just as Zeltharian law wouldn't apply if human forces had murdered 127,000 of your people. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his advisors whispered urgently, their voices too low to be picked up by the transmission equipment. What proof do you have of these alleged atrocities? He asked finally. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. We have the wreckage of the colonies. We have the bodies of the children your forces murdered. We have the Imperial Survey reports describing the sterilization of inhabited worlds. And we have the recorded testimony of Admiral Threx himself. The screen split again. A third image appeared showing the interior of what looked like a prison cell. An elderly Zeltharian sat on a simple bench wearing the plain gray uniform of Imperial prisoners. Admiral Threx was captured by human intelligence operatives 6 months ago, Chen explained. He's been very cooperative in explaining exactly what happened to our colonies. The old admiral looked directly into the camera. I followed standard protocols, he said in a shaky voice. The colonies were identified as obstacles to territorial expansion. Sterilization was authorized under Imperial Expansion Protocol 7. I didn't know they had families, children. The reports just called them unauthorized settlements. Emperor Valdris stared at the image of his former admiral. The man who had served the Empire faithfully for decades was now a broken old prisoner. confessing to crimes that would horrify the galaxy. Your Majesty, Admiral Chen said quietly, humanity spent centuries learning to fight wars against ourselves. We got very good at it. Then we discovered that other species in the galaxy had never learned to fight anything as dangerous as humans. Are you threatening the Empire? I'm explaining reality to you. Your fleets are currently surrounded by human forces throughout Imperial space. Your military technology is centuries behind ours. Your tactics are designed to fight enemies who follow the same rules of physics that you do. We don't follow those rules. The Emperor looked around his throne room. His advisors and ministers stared back at him with expressions of fear and uncertainty. For the first time in Imperial history, the Zeltharian military was completely outmatched. What happens if we refuse your terms? He asked. Then we'll take what we want by force. The families of the murdered colonists will still get justice. The Empire will still lose those territories. The only difference is how many Imperial citizens die in the process. And if we agree, then humanity and the Empire learn to coexist as equals. Trade, diplomacy, mutual cooperation, all the things that civilized species do with each other. Emperor Valdris was quiet for several minutes. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. Accept the human terms and humiliate the Empire in front of the entire galaxy. Refuse and watch Imperial civilization burn under. Weapons that made mockery of known physics. The territories you're demanding contain billions of Imperial citizens, he said finally, who will be free to remain under Imperial protection or accept human citizenship as they choose. We're not interested in conquering people, Your Majesty. We're interested in making sure that what happened to our colonies never happens again. The reparations will bankrupt the Imperial Treasury. The Yao Imperial Treasury was built on the wealth stolen from conquered worlds. I'm sure you'll manage. The Emperor closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, Admiral Kethvox could see that the decision had been made. The Empire accepts your terms, Emperor Valdris said quietly. The throne room erupted in shocked whispers from his advisors. Several ministers looked like they wanted to protest, but the Emperor silenced them with a gesture. However, he continued, this agreement comes with conditions. The Empire retains sovereignty over all core worlds. Human expansion into Imperial space will be limited to the territories specified in your demands, and any future conflicts will be resolved through diplomatic channels, not military action. Admiral Chen nodded. Agreed. We'll have our diplomats contact yours within the week to work out the details. The transmission ended. The throne room disappeared from the screen, leaving only Captain Chen's calm face looking out at the remnants of the Grand Fleet. Admiral Kethvox, she said, your remaining ships are free to return to Imperial space. Consider this a lesson in what happens when civilized species stop acting civilized. The human fleet began to withdraw from the Nexus Prime system. One by one, the ships that had appeared like nightmares faded back into hyperspace. Within minutes, only the Indomitable remained. Oh, and Admiral? Chen's voice carried one final message. Tell your people that humanity remembers everything. We remember our friends and we remember our enemies. Make sure the Empire chooses which one it wants to be. The Indomitable vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of the most powerful fleet in galactic history, and the knowledge that the galaxy had new apex predators. As Admiral Kethvox surveyed the destruction around him, he realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The age of Imperial dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun.